I am the great and intelligent Rabbid. Now, you may know the animator Don Bluth, who was the creator of the animation movies like An American Tail, The Land Before Time, All Dogs Go to Heaven, Rockadoodle, Thumbelina, A Troll in Central Park, The Pebble and the Penguin, Anastasia, Bartok the Magnificent and Tiny. But he made a very first animated length movie that we going to review today. It's called The Secret of NIMH. Let's go find out the secret about the NIMH. The story. This is my first time reviewing a 2D movie, so let's get to the story. The widowed mouse named Mrs. Brisby must save her ailing son, Timothy, and her family from being plowed under by the farmer's spring planting. She seeks help from a colony of intelligent rats who were formerly lab animals at the National Institute of Mental Health, aka NIMH. The rats, led by Nicodemus, agree to help, revealing they were experimented on and given enhanced intelligence. Mrs. Brisby's journey involves navigating danger, discovering the rat's history, and ultimately using a magical amulet to save her family and their home. When I started watching this movie, it was very scary at first when Dragon the cat started chasing Mrs. Brisby when she first met Jeremy the crow, but in the end it was very touching and heartwarming. This is why Don Bluth was the first movie director in 1982, and the other animated movies was released in 1982 was The Last Unicorn, Pink Floyd, The Wall, The Snowman, The Plague Dogs, The Dark Crystal, Hey Good Lookin' and Tron, but The Secret of NIMH was the famous animated movie in 1982. The characters. It's time to meet the characters from the first ever Don Bluth movie. Despite being sweet and kind, Mrs. Brisby is shy and timid in the beginning and is scared easily, especially by Dragon the cat, and hides. But when Timothy became ill, she became willing to do anything to save him, even if it meant visiting the Great Owl and the rats of NIMH, the National Institute of Mental Health. She is also motherly because she has 4 children to take care of. Jeremy is a funny and clumsy black crow who is allergic to cats. He also appears to get scared rather easily as he seems to be faint-hearted of Dragon and the Great Owl. Despite this, however, he befriends the widow Mrs. Brisby and is shown to care for her slightly. Nicodemus appears as the ancient and wise leader of the rats and is highly respected by all but one, Jenner. He is seen writing Jonathan Brisby great deeds as well as his obituary and then again watching over Mrs. Brisby, willing her to visit the Great Owl in the first place. Soon he meets Mrs. Brisby face to face. She looks for him and visits him in his study to ask for help. In this scene, Nicodemus reveals the truth about Jonathan Brisby, Mr. Ages, and informs Mrs. Brisby of their former lives spent at the National Institute of Mental Health. Afterwards, he gives her the amulet, and recruits her to his faction in exchange for moving of the Brisby family's winter home. Jenner was one of many rats freed by Jonathan Brisby from NIMH. However, quite a few mice and rats died in the process of escaping. The survivors then moved into the rose bush, which served as their home from the unclear about Jenner's movements prior to the film. Now it's time for the facts about this 1982 movie. In 1979, while Disney was in the middle of production on The Fox and the Hound, animators Don Bluth, John Pomeroy, and Gary Goldman left the company, joined by a handful of other members of the animation staff. They were frustrated by Disney's bureaucracy and assembly line attitude, and they believed Disney was neglecting certain animation skills and techniques that would be vital in the years ahead, especially as their veteran artists of the legendary 9 Old Mean retired or died. Disney's The Fox and the Hound cost $12 million. The Black Cauldron, released in 1985, would cost $44 million. The Secret of NIMH, a cool $7 million. Furthermore, it was produced in 30 months, half the time Disney's Toon Features took. The 1971 novel from which the book was adapted is called Mrs. Frisby and the Rats of NIMH. The title was shortened for the movie, and Frisbee, which is pronounced like Frisbee, was changed to Brisby to avoid trademark problems with Wham-O, the company that makes America's favorite flying disc. According to writer, producer Gary Goldman, animator Ken Anderson first took the book to Wolfgang "Wooly" Reitherman, Disney's chief animator. Reitherman's reply: "We've already got a mouse. It's the National Institute of Mental Health, the research facility where rats were being experimented upon." Characters in the movie only call it NIMH except for the very first time it comes up, like farmer's wife said, "Dear, a man came by today, from NIMH." Farmer said, "NIMH?" Farmer's wife said, "Yes, you know, the National Institute of Mental Health." He was asking if we had noticed anything strange about the rats on the farm. Anecdotally, when we mentioned this on Twitter, we were surprised to find that many fans of the film never realized what NIMH meant. Jenner, the conniving rat who sabotages the plan to move Mrs. Brisby's home and kills Nicodemus, is assisted by a reluctant sidekick, but this beta rat becomes conscience-stricken, turns on Jenner, and is ultimately the one who kills him. It wasn't until after the film was released that its makers realized the heroic rodent's name is never mentioned. It's Sullivan. One of the first projects that Bluth's new company took on was the 2-minute animated scene in Xanadu from 1980, the famously bad Olivia Newton-John musical. The side project put The Secret of NIMH under an even tighter schedule, and animators were known to take cat naps under their desks while working long hours. John Pomeroy, one of the chief architects of the film, said it was intentional that the owl and Nicodemus have the same walk, glowing eyes, and speech patterns, meant to imply they were two different physical incarnations of the same mystical character. There was even some talk of having the same actor provide the voices for both characters, but it was determined that the film needed as many different celebrity voices as it could get. Mrs. Brisby's magical amulet isn't in the book at all. As the three producers explained in a letter to a school class that asked about the changes, the amulet was a device, or a symbol, to represent the internal power of Mrs. Brisby, a broken bar, a visual extension of an internal, and harder to show in a film, power. In the other alterations, Nicodemus was turned from an ordinary rat into a wizard. Jenner, merely a traitor in the book who leaves the colony, was made into a full-fledged villain, and the ending was changed so that Mrs. Brisby's children are saved by Mrs. Brisby, not the rats. The rotund, jovial comedian was one of America's favorite funnymen at the time, thanks to his association with Mel Brooks, Burt Reynolds, and the Muppets, and his regular appearances on Johnny Carson's Tonight Show. Just as Robin Williams would do with Aladdin's genie a decade later, Dom DeLuise expanded Jeremy the Crow's role by hamming it up and improvising during the recording sessions. The producers, who supposedly all chose DeLuise for the part independently of one another, responded by incorporating his ideas into the script. DeLuise would later provide voices for several other Don Bluth productions. Bluth and Company made their deal with United Artists, but after having its best year ever in 1979, thanks to Rocky II, Manhattan, and Moonraker, fell apart completely in 1980, when Heaven's Gate proved a disastrous flop. As Cora-Protner sold the studio to another company, Trescinda, which also owned Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer in 1982, Trescinda merged them into MGM. The new bosses weren't as interested in NIMH as the old bosses had been. The release date was moved up from late August to early July, putting it in competition with E.T., Rocky III, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan, Poltergeist, Blade Runner, and Annie. What's more, instead of giving the film a wide release, MGM opened it on less than 100 screens and expanded very slowly, so slowly that by the time it rolled out, the advertising had come and gone and people had forgotten about it. NIMH grossed around $14 million in theaters and didn't become truly profitable until it found an audience on home video. Producer Gary Goldman told an online forum that the great John Carradine, hired to lend gravitas to the voice of the wise owl, arrived late to the afternoon recording session and seemed to be intoxicated. Carradine's agent confided that the 75-year-old actor suffered from near-debilitating arthritis, the medication for which made him loopy. Also, the agent said, he'd probably had a martini at lunch. Goldman, Bluth, and their cohorts used coffee and conversation to get Carradine sharp again. Once he was sober, he recorded his lines, declared each delivery to be the best performance he had in him, said he wouldn't do retakes or alternate versions, and left. Good thing he gave a great performance, Goldman said. Well, it's time for this review to end. Thanks for all to watch my 2D movie review.